For many years now, Russ and Craig have had many wide-ranging conversations with folks from all over the gaming world. This is one of those conversations.
D6G, The Lost Chapter.
Hey, welcome back. Craig, what are you eating? What is it?
I don't want to tell you.
Is that some new secret Dunks thing? I didn't know they
I
made those.
snuck in a cookie. Remember when Dunkin' Donuts used to have cookies?
They don't make cookies anymore.
No, and I'm jonesing for a cookie,
Okay.
and so I snuck in a couple cookies. So
Okay.
You got to go to Subway for that.
Yeah.
no, I these are from Panera. These are damn fine cookies.
I can't eat any sweets today. I had too much stuff left over from Easter. I'm still living the Easter high for sweets. So I'm just going to have a coffee here.
Yeah, those of you who have been tracking Russ's weight issue, I've got to say that it was funny yesterday. The man had not had enough calories, so he was hunting for ice cream.
I was.
Very intriguing
Very
with the new
small,
Russ.
very small ice cream.
Yeah, a very small little taste of ice
Soft
cream.
serve,
but
small.
he was adamant. The man was not going to go leave the mall without ice cream.
It's spring. I needed a cherry dip. Okay, that's just how it is.
And man, was that an appetizing color red.
So Dan, it was good to catch you here at Dunkin' Donuts. How you doing?
What are you having, Dan?
What are you having?
I'm good. I got a peep crawler here.
Peep?
Oh,
what?
those.
Are those the
Now-
ones with the
now-
little?
Crawler with a peep on top for Easter.
Yeah. Now, okay, this is a thing. Some people like their peeps like fresh out of the packaging, soft, and some people like to let them air dry a little bit so they get crunchy on the outside.
Yeah, that's Karen.
Which do you prefer, Dan? Crunchy or soft peeps?
Well, here at Dunkin' Donuts, we only have the second option. So I actually don't really like peeps.
So you're just ripping. So basically, you bought this just to rip the peeps' head off and throw it in the trash. Basically, is
Yeah,
what
that's
I'm
the
there.
fun part.
Okay.
I also have an IBC for some inexplicable.
See, now you got me. I want an IBC,
See,
Dan.
he snuck an IBC in.
That's the best root beer. If you're not familiar with IBC root beer, just go buy one and find the awesome. That is IBC. All right, but we're not here to talk about root beer or peeps. Although we could.
Forget it. I'm out of here.
We got Dan here under false.
Right. Since we got Dan here, as most of you probably know, Dan Yarrington, as we like to say, the hardest working man in the board game industry, is a proud owner of both Myriad Games and is intimately involved in a little company called Game Salute. And Dan, I was looking at this webpage on the GameSalute.com site, and I wanted to ask you about this. So there's this concept of the life and times of a board game. And it's kind of cool. So you kind of walk folks through like what the process is to get a board game from, someone's bright idea. They woke up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat going, oh my God, I had the perfect game, to a box on a store shelf. So it'd be kind of fun if you could walk us through this whole thing and kind of what each of the stages are, what they're like, and where some of the challenges are for each stage. What do you think?
Why, I'd be happy to, Russ.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
And if you'd like to follow along at home, you can go to gamesalute.com/progress.
Yes.
To begin your interactive
Now,
D6G experience.
If you're driving, be aware that in most states that would be illegal on your phone to do that while you're driving. So just be advised that we do not condone using your phone while driving for any kind of visual aid.
That's
you
correct.
can be a wuss if you want.
Right.
We would rather that you were alive and a wuss
than dead, but having more game knowledge. That's the thing. Die.
Okay.
I guess you're going to die with wisdom, right? I guess that's the thing.
Yeah. So the idea behind the life and times of a board game was really spawned maybe a year and a half ago when at Game Salute we were thinking through all the stages of game production and how you publish a game. And so we thought it'd be neat to present it in sort of a old-timey, Dickensian, like, okay, here's the life and times of,
Wait.
You're taking it all the way from birth all the way to death.
Is Dickensian a word, Craig? I'm going to go to the English
It is
teacher.
indeed.
It is? Okay, fair enough. I was just going to defer to you on that one.
It's a quite advanced word.
I have to help with a visual aid here because this is really an awesome idea. So if you go to this webpage on GameSplit, they show each of the stages of the game process, and you have different
in a 3D looking little graphic.
And for each of the durations of the process, the average amount of time, Dan's got dice here. So like it's D20 minutes to determine how to come up with your game concept, but then D4 years to design the process. I love the idea of the dice, Dan. That's great.
Yeah, that was the original concept of presenting it because we had a lot of people that were like, I just want you to tell me how long it takes. And originally, it was a timeline. It was like, well, it takes about this long, like say 4 to 6 months for this. And then really we were like, well, that's not really accurate because it's not a precise thing. It's not like it will be this long. So like transit from the factory, we put 1D10 weeks. It's like, well, that's ridiculous. How could it possibly take that long? Oh, trust me.
Right.
Sometimes it takes 10. And sometimes if you do it domestically, we literally had a shipment come in from Michigan the other day. It took 1 day.
Wow. There you go.
So that can be very quick. And that's what the dice are designed to show you. And also to have the idea that sometimes you have to re-roll. Like sometimes you roll 3d6 months for production, and then like, oh god, something just got messed up. The mold's all broken in half because of a tsunami, and we have to roll again and see what we get. And we hope we roll low.
Oh man! So basically, you're telling me that designing a board game is like roll and move Candyland. You land in a square, go back to start.
No, it's much worse than that.
That's awesome. So this is great. I actually, Dan, I do a lot of project management for work. I think I'm going to steal this idea. Just next time I present to my boss, I'm going to be like, hey, so here it is. The development time of this project is going to be 46. So just, work.
There you go. and these amounts, as sort of silly as they are, these are actually sort of accurate based on our previous timelines. Right. So if you look at most concepts come very quickly. You're sitting at the diner. Oh, I'd love to make a game that's like Summoner Wars, but with pie. And you're like, oh, that sounds awesome. I love pie. And then somebody else goes, well, I really want to make a game that's like spades, but it involves ninjas, and you end up making ninja spades or something where they all have shovels and they attack each other. Right. So the example I used at PAX East was, okay, I'm sitting here and I'm like, what would be a cool game? I want to make a game about hobo samurai. That's what I want to make a game about. And so those concepts are really easy, right? So that's why that's 1d20 minutes.
Right.
And that's really just the basic idea of like, okay, wouldn't it be awesome if we had a game like blah? Mm. And you have to have a reason for having that game. It can't just be like, I would like another game about zombies, please.
Right.
That's the core concept. That's usually what people define as design. That's what we found.
That's not design.
That's why we called it a concept, because they would take it a little step farther. They'd be like, and I've written some rules. Right. But so many times early on, over the last couple of years, we've received over 800 submissions.
Wow.
I think we're at 825 or something like that now. In the last 2-ish years, 2 and change. And that's a lot to look at. And we're like, why? We're like, oh, this concept sounds really neat, right? Your basic pitch sounds neat. And we had to update our submission form because we started realizing that people had not really, they hadn't written the rules. We were like, how many times did you playtest this? And they're like, I've thought about it a couple times. and they would come to us saying, I have this game that I want you to publish. And we're like, no, you have an idea, right? That is a concept. That is nothing, right? You haven't tested it. You haven't developed it. And we got stuck in a few projects. I won't name names, but we got stuck in a few projects where we were like, oh, this sounds so neat. It's sort of like 75% done. And that seems like it's close enough. It seems like we could push it over the edge. Mm. And we spent literally, just years at this point working on these things to effectively do what the designer should have done to begin with, to design and develop and playtest and really refine the game. So that's stage 2 is design and development. And that is designing the game rules, actually writing them, testing them, editing them, making sure that they're clear, creating prototypes, playtesting them, then critiquing them, then playtesting them again, then revising, then playtesting, then redesigning, then playtesting, then tinkering, then redesigning, then playtesting, then tweaking, then modifying your prototype, then playtesting. And then finally, you playtest some more, and then you get to a complete what we call a locked set of mechanics and rules.
Now, I think this is awesome, because if you look at the difference between how long you estimate it takes for the concept, which is D20 minutes, to how long it takes to do design and development, which is D4 years, you're literally, the order of magnitude there between I have a brilliant idea to a fully realized rule set that's good enough to actually put a stake in the ground and say this is a reasonably well thought out and playable game concept is just orders and orders of magnitude longer.
And part of that range is the complexity of the game, right? Obviously, more complex games take more time to develop. And so if you had a card game that was very simple that had 3 rules, that would probably be within a year, right? That's relatively quick. But a lot of it is also the function of passing time. So for a lot of developers, and we really refer to designers as developers now because what we're paying a royalty for to developers is development. We're not actually paying for the design. Because if you bring me I've got a skirmish-based miniatures game and it uses 3d6 and blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, great, but is it better?
Right.
How is it better? Why? Right. All that sort of stuff.
Right.
And that's what development is all about. So people will say, I've been working on this game for years. They're like, okay, great. Well, how many hours have you logged on it? Like, oh, well, I've been working on it. Like, what does that mean?
Right.
Have you been working on it 10 hours a week for years? Or have you been working on it, like, thinking about it for a couple of years, and then you spent 20 hours in the last month working on it?
Right.
And that's very different. So that's design development, and that is the longest of the segments.
Right.
And then there's sort of an interstitial element here, which is vetting, which is effectively like submitting your game or yourself looking at the game if you're going to self-publish and saying, is this worth investing even more time in to fund and to find the money to make this and to coordinate everything that I need to coordinate and actually go to production. And you'll notice that most people think that they're done when they're done with concept and design development. So after the first two steps, it's like, well, I'm done. I did all of that, so I've done most everything. So what does a publisher do?
Right.
Well, this is the next stuff that publishers do.
This is only
stage
so,
3.
folks. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 8 stages here? 7 stages? 7 stages here, and we've just described the first 2. So design and development is not done. The design, so that's really interesting. So now, and I think it's important to point out, Dan, again here, this is like, if you think about writing a book, and Craig's pretty familiar with this. So you have the idea for your book, and then you're going to go write and arguably edit the novel, which means you and someone is going to help you edit it, and that's also probably D1 to 4 years, or at least a large number of months. In Craig's case, it's 3 days because he's awesome. But then you have this little incidental step, which is find some way to get it published, which is a non-trivial task. So in this case, it's find a publisher like Game Salute, or figure out a way you're going to self-publish or build out a some kind of way. And same with the book, you got to figure out some kind of way. Are you going to self-publish? You got to find an actual, a traditional publisher. You got to find some other ways to get out there. So there's definitely a little mini step here that's not even included as one of your 7 steps. That is, figure out your path to publication, right?
Right, and that we sort of included in the creation, but it is a decision point. There's a decision point between stage 2 and stage 3, which is this game really good enough to invest a ton of time and effort and energy and money into to make it a reality beyond just, because if you just want a game to play with your buddies, congratulations, you've got it, right? You've got a prototype. If you really enjoy it, play it. And there's so many times people come to us, oh, all my friends love this game. Great. And you made a game for your friends, right? Like, do your friends buy thousands of copies of a game? Because if not, then you're going to need to find out if this is commercially viable. So that's sort of the funding / evaluation step. And that it's an interstitial step between design development and creation. Now, creation, once you've decided to move forward with publication, you have to coordinate with artists for illustrations. You have to coordinate with graphic designers for layout and icons and sculpts and designs of custom pieces. And those are different things. Art and graphic design are very different.
Yes.
So you have to deal with different people for those usually. You have to generate a library of assets. You have to modify those assets and lay them out in cards. You have to figure out if your layout of the cards works in play. You have to upgrade your prototypes. You have to make marketing materials, whether you're making videos or how to play things or just rules overviews or box art, everything. And then you have to do rules editing. You have to continue playtesting. You have to make any revisions for expansions or anything like that. And this part varies pretty widely. I put 1d12 months for this. Generally, if you're working continuously on a game, if you have a lot of art assets, like for Storm Hollow, for instance, we had over 520 unique illustrations.
Wow.
So that was an exception to this. That took more than 12 months to actually, I think it took about 12 months because we had scheduled that in. We're still waiting on the written content for that game from the writers, but the art is all done. And that 520 something art assets, I believe it was something like 5 or 6 artists working on it for 9 months.
Yeah.
So, and you see this at like Disney and stuff when they make movies, right? Like you can do it in a sort of finite period of time, but it takes a huge amount of effort, a huge amount of sort of hours of investment.
Yep.
So that's the creation phase. Yep. And that's about 1d12 months. So
a month to a year, depending on the scope of the game and what its production value is going to be and all that stuff, right?
Yeah. If you're making zombie dice and you need a cover and you need, 3 dice designs, you're done. There you go. Congratulations. Right. But if you're doing something with a lot of art, then that's going to expand. And also the complexity. If it has more rules, you're going to take more time to edit them, et cetera. We're just going back to print on the second edition of Nothing Personal, a much more complicated game than, say, Kerflip. And Nothing Personal, we're redoing the entire rule book and we're really digging in and making sure that it's locked down for the second edition. And that takes a much longer amount of time because it's a more complex game.
Yep.
So then we go to production.
Yeah.
That's 3D 6 months.
3D 6 months. So interesting. So 3 months to a year and a half, basically, on this one. So what's up with the variation on production?
Well, are you including custom pieces like miniatures? Are you including custom dice? Are you including sourced dice? Are you including custom wood? Are you including vacuform insert, the little plastic insert trays? Right. Are you printing domestically or are you printing overseas? Whether you're printing in Europe or you're printing in China. There's all sorts of variables that go into that. And then a lot of it is proofing. So for Kickstarters especially, you'll see a lot of changes. We have up to 5 or 6 quotes for projects that change over the course of that production phase.
Right.
Oh, well, now we've added this bonus card, so now we have to figure out what the different sheets set up. Now we've added this extra bit. Now we have to source this book box from another supplier because our regular supplier can't make those, that sort of thing. So that can go relatively smoothly. Usually the really low end is 3 months, and that includes your proofing, your printing if you're just doing printed components, and then your assembly and just sort of getting it all ready and the administrative time involved.
Right.
And then on the upside, and 18 months, you can go longer than that, but that's a pretty reasonable range, 3 to 18 months. So that's 3D 6 months. You have to get a quote from the factory. You have to get all your files ready. You have to send them over to them. You have to reformat them often to make sure they're in the right format for them to print. Then you have to get press proofs. So you're going to get digital proofs. Then you're going to get material proofs. Then you're going to review those, do any modifications. And that could happen a few times. Like you could be re-rolling one of your D6 over and over again. You're like, oh, geez, you didn't quite modify this properly. Okay, let's fix that. Especially if you have any custom stuff. So rocket dice is one that we did, custom rocket-shaped D6s and other dice. And that's taken
forever.
Geez, I think probably 12 to 14 months just in getting the die so that you can actually make it, because it's a totally new thing.
Right.
It's not just like make a D6 with custom sides.
Right.
It's a brand new thing, and so we had to get the right quality because you didn't want it. The first ones we got were sort of like gummy bears. That's what they looked like and felt like. And we had to get really good weight to them and have the right rounding. So custom bits really add a lot of time to that. And then you have to do drying and treatment for printing components. People don't think about that. Like you can't just print something and then put it in a box. You have to let it dry. They have big drying rooms to do this. And then you have to sort and assemble all the games. That's what a lot of people forget about too, especially, pretty much anywhere. There's no machine that puts D6s into games.
Right.
At the scale that we're talking about, maybe in like Hasbro factories or something, but in the factories that we're talking about, this is all done by hand. So if you get a little pack of cards, it's in a zip bag inside your game. Somebody did that. Whether it was somebody in China or somebody domestically or somebody in Europe, they did that there. So there's lots to it. Then they pack them all up in big cartons, the cases. They put them onto pallets or into a truck or a shipping container, and then they head out from the factory. That's the end of the production stage.
Nice. Wow, that's a lot of work. And that's so that's pretty much now your games exist. They're on a pallet someplace, but they're not at your friendly professional gaming store or at a warehouse. So now we got to get them from the factory to wherever they got to go, right?
Right. Yep. And that comes back to that 1D10 weeks. So it could be really, short if it's domestic. A lot of stuff is not done domestically just because of cost. You've got inland freight. So let's say I'm shipping something from China. It's not like I just go, oh, China, teleport this to the boat, right? You have to send a truck over to wherever they are. If they're in Shenzhen or, another part of China, these can be hundreds of miles inland.
Right.
And so you have to pick it up, take it to the port. You have to clear customs in the country of origin.
Yeah, how many times do you hear about a game getting stuck in customs? And game names really screw up your customs. I remember when, back in the day when, Pandemic first came out.
Oh, yeah.
And everybody's waiting for Pandemic, got stuck in customs forever because this is right around, a little bit after 9/11. It's like you can't ship a game with a giant word pandemic on the side of the box through customs without getting inspected.
Act of terror. Or
right.
So yeah, customs has to clear both in China or in the origin country.
Right.
And then it has to go by air or by ocean, mostly by ocean. And then it has to clear customs in the destination country, in this case in the U.S. And then you got inland freight. So we're sort of lucky that we're just north of Boston. So you can either get stuff through Boston or through New York very quickly. It's a 5-hour drive from New York. It's a 1-hour drive from Boston, maybe, with traffic. So we've got some options. But let's say that you're in St. Louis, right? Well, now you've got to either come in the West Coast and take it across by train or by truck, or you've got to come in the East Coast. And so if you're doing it in Europe, you'll come in the East Coast. If you're doing it in China, you'll come in through the West Coast. So there are lots of options for delays there. Shipping lane capacity, because it's also not like, even when your stuff is ready to go, it's cleared customs. There's not just a bunch of shipping containers just sitting there waiting to leave at a moment's notice.
I have to ask, your last delay cause for transit is actually listed as pirates.
That's true. So, literally, there are have you seen Captain Phillips, right?
Oh, I know, but I mean, how many have there been some known games lost due to pirates?
I don't think there are many games that have been known to that.
But still, you got to watch out for pirates. I'm with you on this. So this is
it's more of a thematic,
right. License. Yes.
Yeah, it's string theory.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
String theory.
So you have shipping lane capacity. It's basically just like how many containers are moving back and forth across the ocean and when are they moving? Because you could have stuff sit in the port for 10 days while it's waiting for a shipping container to leave. Right. It could even be in the shipping container. And then people are like, it's in the shipping container. Why isn't it left? Well, because it's the whole point of a container. It has to fill up first.
Right.
You're not just going to ship. Otherwise, you just ship it by pallets. Then it would cost more. Weather does affect things pretty regularly, actually. Usually it's just a storm or it gets delayed by a few days going through this port. But if you have a tsunami or something like that, you could lose the whole boat. Right. So the equipment issues, like we've had things where, everything's in Boston. Our container's here. But the flatbed truck that was supposed to pick it up had the bolts, basically where you bolt the container to the truck so it doesn't fall off while you're driving. Those were broken.
Oh, geez.
So they couldn't actually attach it to the truck. So then they had to get a different truck to come in and bring it in. So there's all sorts of issues like that. And that's all we give that 1d10 weeks.
Wow. So that can be quite a variance too. So then you finally, so now it's made it to its destination point, which is a warehouse someplace, I assume. So now what? What's left?
So now we're going to go to fulfillment and outgoing shipping. And that should probably take all of like 1d8 minutes, right? Like from the time that it arrives at your warehouse, you just instantly turn around and start shipping people's stuff out. That seems reasonable, right?
Well, except you got to get an address on there.
Well, yeah, so maybe like 1d10 minutes or 1d8 plus 2.
Fair enough.
So that's sort of the expectation for people that haven't either worked in a warehouse or haven't dealt with a lot of that stuff before, especially at volume. But in reality, this can take about 4d8 days. Okay. So you're talking about 4 to 32 days, that sort of range. And it can take longer. I mean, a lot of people's projects, I just talked to somebody that took 45 days. It was about a month and a half.
Wow.
They were doing it all themselves, right? Just like in their garage. And it just takes a long time.
Right.
So the more people you have for that, the better systems you have, the better facilities you have, the more that's going to improve. But you have to get everything in. You have to count it all, make sure you have everything. You have to check it for damages. You have to report any damages. Then you have to organize everything to make sure you have the right stuff if you have expansions and base games. Then you have to make sure you got all your supplies, your boxes, and your tape and all that stuff. Then you have to assemble all the boxes. People always forget about that step. Then you have to put the things in the boxes, put the packing material in there. And then you have to make sure that you've got the right labels on the right packages. You got to make your pick lists and integrate everything into your shipping system if you have to upload data. And then you have to assemble stuff. Effectively, you're assembling individual packages. Yeah, obviously, that's very easy if you have one game.
I got to think this step is going to vary depending on, like, if it's just one game, it's still a lot of work. But compare that to, like, it's a Kickstarter with 30 stretch goals and a bunch of optional add-ons, and everybody's got different add-ons.
Exactly.
And so you've got to individually pack each box for each person.
Depending on how many different levels you have on a Kickstarter.
Right.
So if you had one game, like that's why Forgotten King for Soda Pop did it the way that they did. They just said, nope, there's one level. Everybody's getting the same stuff.
Right.
And that will literally cut your shipping time, your fulfillment time, the actual processing, probably by 75%.
Wow.
It's not actually the volume of packages. Like we can ship 9,000 packages in 2 days.
It's the customization of each box.
It's a customization or the number of batches. So it'll take just as long for compounded. When we did compounded, there were about 20-something hundred backers, 2,600 maybe. And we did like 2,200 of them in like 3 days. And then it took for the remainder, like the 500 or 400 or whatever it was, that had different levels, it took actually like a week to do. Wow. because effectively you're setting up an assembly line every time. You have to stage everything, and then you have to run it through. And then, of course, you've just got to get it out. I mean, just the amount of time to load into a truck, into like a number of FedEx trucks, thousands of packages, that can take time, right? So 1d8 days, and then you've also got to do all the customs paperwork for international shipments. And that is a lot of work for the internationals because you have to fill out, the proper forms so it's not a hassle for them. And you've got to do different electronic transmissions of data and all that sort of stuff. So there's just a lot to that fulfillment and outgoing shipping step. So that's about 48 days.
Wow. And there you go. And does fulfillment include like getting it to the game stores in addition to the individuals if it's not a Kickstarter type thing?
So that's the outgoing shipping, and that's sort of covered. There's a little bit of a stage in between there where it lands at a distributor's warehouse if the store's not getting it directly. And then the distributor then sells it to the store, and they ship it out to them. But it's all sort of part of the shipping process. It's usually about a week or two at the end of it.
Cool. And
now,
then that's
Dan,
it.
Did you on purpose use one of each of the role-playing polyhedrons in this, or was that just a happy coincidence?
Oh no, I did that intentionally.
I love it.
Nice. It's a full set.
I did do a lot of math to figure out how to, because I had the numbers, and I'm like, okay, this is the range. What can I use for that? So I was like, that's where 4d8 and 3d6 came from.
Yeah, I like that the d20s is thrown in there as the 20 minutes. That's awesome. So, Dan, thank you so much. Hopefully that has helped those folks here who were able to join us in Dunkin' Donuts today understand better some of the challenges and why some of these stages take so long, and appreciate how much work goes into getting one of these games from a twinkle in someone's eye to actually a box on a shelf.
Indeed, and that's stage 7, of course, is worldwide release. So that's getting it into all the stores and to individuals. And then stage 8, we don't like to talk about. That's death, which is when the game gets recycled or thrown into a dumpster when it's not selling.
Right.
Ouch.
Oh, ouch. We don't talk about stage 8. Stage 8 is not a happy place.
Stage 8. Now stage 8 will now be a euphemism.
right. Stage 8.
He's gone stage 8.
He's gone stage 8.
You have reached stage 8.
Get the paddles. He's going stage 8. All right.
Clear.
Right. Well, Dan, thank you so much for joining us here in Dunkin' Donuts today and enlightening us on the effort it takes to make a game. And please join us in a week. We'll have you back on the main show to talk about all kinds of crazy nonsense, including the life and times of Kickstarters, or other interesting topics.
Now, and I have no doubt we'll talk about this on the main show, Dan, but if somebody is if they have a gleam in their eye and it pertains to some sort of gaming thing, how can they get in touch with you?
Well, they can email me at the main Game Salute office, which is salute@gamesalute.com. Salute like a military salute at gamesingularsalute.com. Or you can catch us on Twitter at Game Salute, or you can find us on Facebook.
Awesome.
Very good.
Thank you.
See you in a week.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Thanks for purchasing a D6G Lost Chapter. Supporting the show helps it grow.